Hey lovelies! So today we are continuing our Yayoi Kusama study, and we are going to talk about her fascination with not only polka dots this time, but also her fascination with pumpkins. So Kusama has been fascinated by nature and pumpkins since her childhood, and pumpkins became a regular feature of her art in the 1970s. Known in Japan as kabocha, pumpkins are symbolic of happier times from Kusama's childhood, and she says that they represent stability and comfort. She prefers to use pumpkins because they're attractive in color and form, but they're also tender to the touch. And she's famous worldwide for her polka-dotted pumpkin sculptures and paintings. So let me just show you some of her paintings, some of her pumpkin paintings, and some of her gigantic pumpkin sculptures real quick. Okay, so now that you've seen her cool and gigantic sculptures and paintings, we are going to make, slightly smaller replicas of her pumpkin sculptures, and we are going to use paper mache to do that. Now, paper mache is a French technique, and it literally means chewed paper. And you're going to see why. We're not going to be chewing paper, but it literally means chewed paper, and you're going to see why when I explain the technique to you in a little bit. But let me tell you what you are going to need for this. I meant to take a picture of the supplies, but I did not, so I apologize. But you are going to need flour, water, magazine pages or newspaper pages, regular paper, a balloon, and some rubber bands. The other thing you're going to want to do is, this is a super messy technique. I've washed off several times and I'm still covered in the glue from it. So you're going to want to cover whatever area you're going to make this in really well with either garbage bags, or I just covered it in a ton of paper, which was helpful. Or you could even do this in the tub. But whatever you choose, you're going to want to really cover it well, or else be prepared to really clean the surfaces. So prep is important there. Okay, so now that I've explained what we need, let's go ahead and get started making our replicas of Kusama's pumpkin sculptures. Oh, let me actually say real quick that this is a multi-day project. Because it's paper mache, it's going to need time to dry. So we are going to make the paper mache sculpture part today and then let it dry for a couple days. And then we're going to revisit it to paint it on Thursday. Okay, now let's go. All right, so the first thing you're going to need to do is make your paper mache paste. Now what I did here is I took 1 cup of flour, put it in, and then I added 2 cups of water. And you can multiply that by as much as you need. But 1 cup flour, 2 cups of water, and then just stir it up to make a paste. And then you can set that off to the side because we're not going to be using it just yet. So we have our balloon, and you're going to blow up your balloon, not very big, smaller than a cantaloupe or around the size of a cantaloupe, no bigger. I'll blow up mine real quick and then I'll show you what it looks like. Oh, and of course, if you need help blowing up the balloon, and especially if you have not yet learned how to tie a balloon, of course ask a grown-up to help you, especially with the tying part, because tying balloons is very tricky. So this is about the size that you want to make it. This is not the size that you want to make your balloon. It will become way too hard to put the rubber bands on it. Small. Think small. Here, this is like the size of my hand. Okay? You want this little part at the top because that's going to become our stem. Now you have your 3 rubber bands, and it's time to put them over the balloon to make the ridges or the ribs of the pumpkin, just like we learned about when we studied pumpkins specifically. Now you can try to do this on your own, but I found it much easier as a 2-person job. I'll show you one at a time how they go on the pumpkin. The first rubber band is going to go around the middle of your pumpkin vertically. This little tie part is still at the top because we want that to be the stem. Okay, the next one goes, so if this is our first one, our next one goes across the other way. And again, it's going to be easiest if you have one person hold the balloon and one person stretch and pull the rubber band around the balloon. And again, if your balloon is too big, this is going to be very difficult. And if your balloon is the right size, it will not be that difficult. Okay. All right, and finally we put our last one on. And notice how I'm not making it perfectly even. If you remember, Kusama's pumpkins are not perfectly even, and pumpkins in the wild are not perfectly even. So we don't have to worry about perfect symmetry here. We're just getting our 3 rubber bands on to create the ribs of the pumpkin. All right, now is the exciting part because we're getting ready to apply the paper mache. So what we want to do is rip the magazine pages into strips. Does not have to be perfect. About this size, which is like 1.5 to 2 inches wide, and just down the page. Rip it into some nice strips. So you have a good collection of strips here ready to put on the balloon. Okay, so then you're going to take one strip at a time and dip it in this paste that you've made. Really push it down because magazines are not that porous. Let it soak, and you're gonna pull it up. And I like to take 2 fingers like this and just get off the excess. And then you're just gonna nicely place it on the balloon. All right, then you're gonna get another strip. Again, push it down into the bowl. I like to use a bowl with a lot of space so that I have room to move around. It's also a good sensory feel. Then pull off the excess and put it on. And you're going to do this until your entire balloon is covered with magazine, and instead of the whatever color the balloon is, you can only see the magazine. So go ahead and do that. I did this entirely with the magazines, and I did my best to keep the integrity of the pumpkin shape with the ribs. I'm going to kind of push this around a little bit to make it more prominent where the ribs are. But anyway, I covered this fully with my magazines, and this is what we're going to call the base coat. Now the next thing we're going to do is add a second coat, but we're not going to use the magazines for this one, and I'll show you why in just a second. We are going to use colored paper for the second coat. And that is because I find that when you use magazines or newspaper and then try to do a second coat, it's very difficult to tell if you've fully covered your paper mache creation with the second coat. So when you use a solid color that's different from your base coat, you can very easily tell if you've fully covered it. So step one, rip this into strips. Okay, so I've got some nice strips here of the colorful paper. And I'm gonna do what I do, which is push it down into my paste, pull it up. I'm going to wipe it off. I would normally use my fingers, but I only have one hand right now, so I'm just gonna wipe it on the side. And then I'm going to lay it over here on my pumpkin like this. And I'm going to keep going around until now my entire pumpkin is this solid color orange. And then I will know that I have fully completed my second coat. All right, so now that my pumpkin is entirely coated with the second coat, it's completely covered in orange paper, what I'm going to do is set it aside somewhere safe for the next couple days, and we are going to revisit these on Thursday for painting. But this takes a bit of time to dry, so find a spot somewhere away from pets or younger siblings, and set it there where it can dry for the next 2 days, and we'll revisit it on Thursday to paint.